Hi guys, welcome back to a case of econ struggles. Welcome to another causal inference struggle. We've talked a lot about the different sorts of causal inference methods you could use on a given data set, but one of the hardest questions when you're looking at data, when you're trying to think about exactly what to do, is which empirical strategy do I actually want to use? There's a lot of different options. How can I sort of think about exactly which one is best given my question and given my data? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Timestamps are below if you would like to jump around, but let's get right into it. So I think the first question that you should ask yourself is what sort of data that you have once your data set is built. So there are three main types of data. There's cross-sectional data, repeated cross-section data, and panel data. What does cross-section data look like? It just means you have a bunch of people in one particular year. And so maybe in the example that we've been talking about with your stress level and whether or not you have a cat, you just see 12 people's stress level and whether or not they had a cat in the year 2022. If you had a repeated cross-section, then maybe you survey 6 people in 2022 and you survey 6 other people in 2023. And each time you survey someone, you ask their stress level and whether or not they own a cat. Panel data is you're going to follow people over the course of those 2 years. So you follow person 1 in 2022 and 2023, follow person 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you have multiple observations for the same person over time. There's also time series data where you have economic indicators like maybe unemployment or inflation, and you just have those indicators over a course of time. But specifically, when you're looking at microeconomic level data, these are the three most common types of data. So if you have a panel data, you can do a difference of difference. But if you have a cross-section or repeated cross-section, you probably can't do difference of difference, for example. The second thing that I think is important to look at is just to think about the institutional context. So what problem are you asking? What are some of the factors about that specific relationship, that specific treatment on outcome that you have in mind? So for example, if your treatment variable is randomly determined, great, you can probably use selection on observables. If it's partially randomly determined, maybe you can use an instrumental variable approach, especially if you observe why someone is treated and why someone is not treated. If you think there's a discontinuity in treatment, so if you think about like the blood alcohol level, if you're above a 0.08, you have a DUI, and if you're below a 0.08, you do not have a DUI, that is a discontinuous treatment. That's a regression discontinuity design. You might also think there's a discontinuity in the effect of treatment at a certain point, and that's called a regression kink design. And if you have panel data and you think common trends holds, then you have difference. We've talked about each of these in separate videos. We'll talk about regression kink design in a future video. So feel free to review those as needed. But I think this is a good table in order to sort of think about what is my question, what is my data, therefore what are some of the empirical strategies that I think are going to work best for my particular question, given my particular data. Some concerns that you might have when picking an empirical strategy. Can you identify your parameter of interest? Will you have internal and external validity? Internal validity, you can just do a bunch of robustness checks and make sure that the coefficient you get from your main model of interest holds if you sort of change that model a little bit or you add or subtract other variables. Does your model have external validity? Do you think that your coefficients that you get, the results that you get qualitatively or quantitatively apply to people outside the sample you estimated your model on? How much sample size do you have? Are you going to have power to run some of these, like regression discontinuity design requires a large sample size? Do you have the sample size in order to sort of pull that off? And of course, as you're writing this paper, you're always thinking, what robustness checks can I run? How can I make it look more and more likely that the result that I got is not a fluke and that the reader should take this result and sort of update the beliefs that they had prior about the question that you're asking. So hopefully this just gives you a couple points to think about when you're trying to pick your empirical strategy. If this was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time for another case of Econ Struggles.